Greetings, fellow scholars. Are you ready to see what the next scenario has in store for us? Let's have a look at the scenario that is going to make math count for us. Our scenario is going to discuss probabilities and populations. In discussing probabilities and populations, we're going to calculate the probability of risk depending on a population, conditional probabilities, subsets of sample spaces, unions, intersections, and complements of sets. We're also going to build tables and Venn diagrams. To kick this scenario off, I wanted to ask you a riddle. We had one grandfather, two fathers, and three sons go skydiving. How many skydivers were there? Well, clearly, we had one grandfather, two fathers, and three sons. So clearly we had 6 skydivers, right? Nope, we only had 3 skydivers. Let's see how that's possible. Sometimes when we're talking about a set of data, which in this case, a set of skydivers, we might have overlapping data elements. You can see here that our grandfather, one of our skydivers was a grandfather, a father, and a son. One of our skydivers was a father and a son, and another of our skydivers was a son. So when we're looking at our data sets, here you can see that of our set of skydivers, we have 3 subsets. The subset of grandfather, father, and son. So when our data entries have, or when our when our set elements have overlapping data entries, you can see what happens here in our Venn diagram. We went from our just showing our sets in circles to actually now showing our sets how they overlap. We had one of our elements belonged to all 3 subsets, one of our elements belonged to 2 subsets, and one of our elements belonged to only one of the subsets. So here you see we record it as just one son, one father, and one grandfather. But again, you have to look at the overlapping sections of the Venn diagram. So we're going to explore a survey done at, this is a hypothetical survey done at Shipley's Donuts. Our population is going to be Shipley Donuts customers at 11 a.m. Our sample is going to be the first 10 customers who walk through the door at 11 a.m. They were asked to check all that apply. Are you 40 pounds or more overweight? Do you have type 2 diabetes? Or do you have high blood pressure? And from our survey, we found that we had, our survey consisted of 10 customers. So our set of data comes from the first 10 customers who walk through the doors of Shipley Donuts at 11 a.m. From those 10 customers, we found that 7 were obese, 6 had high blood pressure, 5 had type 2 diabetes, 5 belonged to 2 subsets. They were obese with high blood pressure. 4 belonged to 2 subsets. They were obese with type 2 diabetes. 3 belonged to the high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, and 3 belonged to all 3 subsets. They were obese with high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. So we need to figure out how can we organize this information so that it looks like the Venn diagram that we created for our skydivers. Now with our skydivers, we had, we only had 6 data entries and 3 subsets. So it was a little bit simpler than organizing all of this data. Here we had 10 samples, and then we had 33 data entries, and we have 7 subsets. So it's a lot more complicated to organize larger data sets. Our goal is to organize our data sets in a way that we can find the overlapping data entries and clean our, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here, all of our samples have been organized into their overlapping groups. It looks like just one sample had nothing, no obesity, no type 2 diabetes, and no high blood pressure. One person was obese without high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes. One person had high blood pressure without being obese and without type 2 diabetes. One person had type 2 diabetes without high blood pressure or being obese, and so on. So let's figure out how we can actually get this data organized. If we have a sample of 10, so here's our entire sample space. This rectangle is our sample space, and in that sample space, I have 10 elements. I have 10 people who we sampled. And we wanted to know who's 40 or more pounds overweight, who has type 2 diabetes, and who has high blood pressure. So we then are going to start organizing our data by starting with the overlapping subsets. Which of these people had belonged to multiple subsets? Well, I'm starting all the way down where we had 3 people who had all 3 diseases: obesity, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. So I went ahead and put that 3 right there in the center. The next thing we want to know is who is obese and has type 2 diabetes without high blood pressure. I just want to go back to this slide right here because I used some notation here you hadn't seen yet. When I say that we're looking for obese and high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, please notice that I used this upside down horseshoe to notate the word "and" when I'm talking about these sets and subsets. So you're going to see this right here. This means that a person has obesity and high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. So we're going to be using this notation throughout the scenario. And again, in that case, we had 3 of them. So now in this case, I want to know who is obese with type 2 diabetes, but does not have high blood pressure. So in other words, I'm looking for this one little piece right here where obesity and type 2 diabetes overlap, but I don't want to include those 3 people who have all 3 things. So look at my Venn diagram. Do you see how my entire circle for obesity overlaps with the other 2 circles? So in this case, to find out who has just obesity and type 2 diabetes, I have to subtract out these 3 people who had all 3. So now I know that just for that one little section of my Venn diagram, I have just one person who belongs in there. I still have all 4 of the people with the overlapping subsets, obesity and type 2, but only one goes in this little section. All right, next we're going to look at who is obese with high blood pressure but does not have type 2 diabetes. Well, again, in this case, we have 5 people who are obese with high blood pressure. But of those 5, 3 of them had all 3. And I want to know who is just only obese with high blood pressure but without type 2 diabetes. So I'm actually going to subtract out that 3, which is going to leave me with just 2 in the section that I want to talk about. All right, moving on here, we find that we had 3 people who had high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, but of those 3, all 3 of them also had obesity. So I subtract that out and it turns out that I have 0 in that section. So you can see that over here I've faded out where it says 3 for the section. I'm not going to be subtracting that out anymore because it's 0. And 0 has no additive or subtractive value. So 0 is of no value to us. So we're not going to keep subtracting that piece like we did with these pieces so far. All right, now I want to know who has type 2 diabetes only. So I have 5 people with type 2 diabetes, but again, I have to subtract out that 3 and that 1 because those people have already been accounted for in my Venn diagram. So now you see that I only get 1 person that has only type 2 diabetes. Moving right along, we do the same thing with high blood pressure. We have to subtract out the 2 sections that have already been accounted for because within this circle, I can only have 6 entries, you see. So I have to subtract out the 2 entries that have already been accounted for to find that I only get 1 in there with just only high blood pressure. All right, last we do obesity, where we find out that of the people who were obese, there was only 1 of them who did not have high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes. All of the rest of the 7, of all the 7 people who were suffering from obesity, only 1 of them was not suffering from type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure. So that's how we work a Venn diagram. And once we get our Venn diagram all separated, then it becomes easier to create this, what we call a frequency table, so we can actually see the real set of data. Now, when we're separating things into our Venn diagram, we might do it with numbers like we did a minute ago, or we might use pictures like we do right here. So you guys can see one of the things that I forgot to point out as we were moving along, I just realized, is this one right here. This one, let's go back to our slides. You guys will see all the way back to the front here where I started off with 10 people in my universe. That's actually what this is called. The rectangle is actually the universe. It's our whole entire set. And then each of these things on the inside is our subset. So we started off with 10 people and then we go down. We used up 3 of them. So now we only have 7 people left in our universe. Here we used up another one, so we have 6 people left, 4 people left. And you see how our universe values change. Well, it didn't change for this one because remember it was 0. And so each time we put somebody into our subsets, we take them out of the universe until in this particular scenario, we ended up with 1 person left who does not have anything, any of these 3 diseases. So when you guys talk about complementary sets, if I want to say of the people at Shipley's Donuts, 9 of them were either obese, had high blood pressure, or type 2 diabetes. So the complement of that is that there's one left over, one person. So the complement of a set is everything that's left over. In this case, one person had nothing, therefore 9 people had something. All right, let's see where we are here. We have separated our data into this beautiful Venn diagram. Oh, and here now we're going to talk about probability. So when we talk about probability of a population, think about this. This was 1 out of 10, so that was 10%, right? Here we also had 10% were only obese, 10% had only high blood pressure, 20% were high blood pressure and obese, and then we had 30% of these 10 people we surveyed were obese with high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. So what that means when we talk about probability is, say I walk into Shipley's Donuts, if this were a good survey, really done well, and the population was actually random, this is a non-official survey just to discuss what we're going to actually do in our scenario here in just a minute on Excel. But in this case, I would say that if I sat in Shipley's Donuts at 11 a.m. and out of every 10 people who walk through the door, I have out of the people who walk through the door, 30% of them are likely to have obesity, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. 10% of the people who walk through the door, it's likely that only 10% of those people have none of these 3 diseases. It's likely that 20% of the people are going to have obesity and high blood pressure. So when you do a survey and you conduct the survey properly and you get these numbers, then you would be able to say, looking forward in the future, you would be able to predict about how many people walk into Shipley's Donuts at 11 a.m. who are going to have obesity, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. So that's what it means when we talk about probability. And we're going to look at that in our Excel report. All right, one last thing before we go on, I just wanted to show this to you. You're going to be looking at this in your Excel scenario as well. We're going to actually look at some real statistics, some true data off the internet from some government websites on obesity, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. So that last survey was something I just made up, but I did kind of run it off these real numbers that we get here when we look at this data. So this is a map of the United States, and in this map we're actually going to use it to calculate the probability of having certain diseases given certain populations. In this case, this is a really cool interactive website. All of these lines over here are the different states. So here's the line down here at the bottom. This is Colorado. 16.4% of the people in Colorado suffer from obesity. So if I were to reach into Colorado there and randomly grab out a person, there's a 16.4% probability that that person is going to be suffering from obesity. Well, what happens if I move over here to Arkansas? Whoa, it more than doubles. So if I randomly choose a person from Arkansas, just reach into Arkansas, randomly choose somebody, pull them out, there's a 35% chance that that person suffers from obesity. And you guys are going to explore these maps and look at type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure in all of these data statistics as well. All right, you guys, I think that was the last slide for this scenario. And we are now going to move on to actually using Excel and calculating our probabilities. So I will see you then. All right, everybody, here we are on the Excel portion of our probabilities and population scenario. The first thing we're going to look at here is a couple of examples of scholar work. This is a piece by John Tinney from the spring 2019 semester, where he created his table and his 2 Venn diagrams to show the probability of being an American with obesity, type 2 diabetes, or high blood pressure, or all 3, or some overlapping set. We also have an example from Abaza here, where she has also pasted another piece of this scenario we'll look at later, but here's the chart and the Venn diagrams. So we are all going to create one of these cool Excel pages, and we're going to create ours from a blank document. We are going to get all of the information to create this from our assignment link. So once you guys go to your assignment link, you will find the Excel document, and we're going to look for this particular semester. This is number 3 of Excel report 1. Now, I am going to set my page up to be a workable, or my screen up to be a workable space. So I'm going to use the icon at the top right-hand corner to restore down my page. My page, once I get it smaller, I can use this little arrow that goes back and forth and make it big and small. Some of you might have the situation where your screen, big and small, doesn't look very much different. But you see right here where it says maximize, if you have the option to maximize it, that means it is restored down. So you can come over to the side, and you can barely see it over there, but my arrow turns into a different way so that I can move this screen. So I know a lot of you know how to do that, but some people don't know how to do it. So make sure you do, because you're going to be using that a lot throughout the semester. Now I am going to use the rest of my space for my Excel page. So I'm going to make my Excel page a little bit smaller and have it fill up the rest of the screen, which if the whole screen was one set and the instructions were taking up 1/3 of the set, the complementary of 1/3 is 2/3. So complementary just means what's left over. All right, now let's look at our instructions for our Excel report. We are looking at, basically this is the same thing we did with our Shipley's Donut survey, except the Shipley's Donut survey, I actually just made that stuff up. But for this particular assignment, we gathered only data from government websites, the Census Bureau. You can actually click on any of these links right here to find out that what is written here is reported by the government and is given in these links. So you guys can actually go through and click on all of these if you want to see the statistics. Some of them you're going to have to click on, and we'll get to that. So the first instructions say to copy and paste the following data table into your Excel. Now, I have never provided data tables to copy and paste before. You always just had to make them. So if you can't get it to copy and paste, please don't be frustrated. Just type it in. Like I said, I've never provided the tables before, so this is something you guys get that the other semester scholars did not get. So I control copy this, and it doesn't always copy right away. You might have to click a couple times to get it to highlight blue. Once you do, hit Control Charlie, come over here to your Excel report, and just click a cell and type Control Victor. Now, you guys can see that a blank space was left here. You can deal with that a couple of different ways. I do want you to recognize that right here where it says Americans, this is cell Bravo 6. Yours doesn't have to be cell Bravo 6. Yours can be any address. Mine just happens to be Bravo 6. But it looks like this sentence goes all the way across here to Foxtrot, right? But it doesn't, because look at what happens if I click echo. See how there's nothing in there? So these are actually, all of these words are written in Bravo 6. So what I'm going to do is just select that cell, and I'm just going to drag it down. Notice how, see my cursor is white and fat. I want it to be like a weather vane. See the arrows on each side? Once I get the weather vane, I can click down and drag it, and it will move it down. Now I want you to notice, for me down here at Bravo 15, I have this longest line, my longest row here, and it goes all the way past golf and into hotel. So what I'm going to do is select all of that from Bravo to hotel, and I'm going to merge it with this little merge icon here. And then I'm going to do that for each of these rows. Remember that when we're dealing with data, we want everything to be aesthetically pleasing, and we want it to look organized so that people can glance at our data to know exactly what it says. And setting things up to be aesthetically pleasing, symmetrical, and even color-coded is always a good idea. And for those of you who don't see colors, you can still code things with different shades. All right, now this automatically, oh, I forgot the top one here, automatically centered everything, but, whoops, but I do not want this stuff centered. I'm gonna go ahead, I'll leave that top piece centered. I'll even make it bold, and I'll even get my little paint can up here and paint it, I don't know, blue, sounds good. Now for the rest of these, I'm gonna select all of the ones below and make them flush left. You see up here a line left. Now I am going to select all of this entire chart, come up here to my borders, and I want a nice thick line style, so I'm going to select a thick line style, and I may choose a color, I don't know, blue. You guys can choose any color you want to. Once you do that, it gives you this little pin, but don't worry about the pin, just click the border again, okay? And now I have a very nice chart that tells me what I'm looking at here, the American population of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. All right, what is the next set of instructions? I have copied and pasted that in there, even though it took a long time. Now I am going to click on the American population link to get the population number for this scenario. So I need this number to continue here. So I'm just going to click this link that says population, American population. And this will take you to a really cool link. You guys are probably going to spend some time exploring this because it's pretty neat. But it does give us the US and world population up to the very second. This is data, collected data, so it is actually projecting according to all the statistics over time how much the population is increasing for every 8 seconds. So, or, you know, you have to give and take. Every 8 seconds someone's born, every 12 seconds someone dies. So we have to, you know, look at all of the data. But for this particular scenario, all I want is this number. For me right now, this number is different than what it's going to be for you when you do this assignment. For me, it's 328,943,892 Americans in the US. I am going to put my apostrophes, or not apostrophes, but commas in there to make it look good. Keep everything easy to read. Okay, now let's see what our next set of instructions are. I have gathered my population, and then it says to click any other statistics if you want to see the government reports to support the data. So feel free to click through those. It's actually quite profound. All right, the next set of instructions say to use the data table from part alpha to calculate the values for the table below. So I did put this chart in here, but am not able to get it to copy and paste. If anybody is able to and you figure out how or why, let us know. But I can get it to highlight blue and copy everything. Eventually I can get it to do that, but I cannot get it to paste there. See, I got it copied, and then I control Charlie and bring it over here to Excel and control Victor, and I get this. So this one is not copying and pasting. I did try inserting the chart 3 different ways and could not make it work, so I can't tell you why. So we're just gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way and create our own chart. And we don't even have to type this in though. We can at least copy these individually and paste it in. So I'll show you what we're going to do. The first thing, I'm gonna count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. Columns are vertical, they go up and down. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows. So 6 columns, 9 rows. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns, and that starts at 7, so 7 to 16. All right, I am actually just changed my mind about something, but since I already have this selected, I'm going to go ahead and put my borders around it. But now I just realized some of these rows are going to be really wide, which is also going to make this other column wide. My table alpha is going to be getting messed up because of this table. So I'm just going to keep this selected. If you unselected it, no problem, just select it again. Get your weather vane cursor. See, weather vane, not weather vane, weather vane. And then I'm just going to move it down so that it's anything I do to this chart does not mess up my table alpha. And that's also the reason I did not put this other table below the first table, because I'm going to widen some of these columns as well. All right, so let's get moving here. Another thing I'm going to do with this entire table, I am going to select the entire table, and then I am going to right-click it and format my cells and wrap. I might have to do that again now that I think about it. If I'm copying and pasting, we'll see how it goes. All right, so now I'm just going to copy these, I select it with my mouse and then Control Charlie, come over here and Control Victor, and then hit enter, and it'll automatically see why I moved it, because it would have made these real wide also. All right, so you guys are actually just going to copy and paste each of these things in here. You see how that one got down there below? It's because of the way I clicked it. So be careful of little things like that. It is better to just go ahead and double click before you paste it in there, just to avoid things happening. So if I click once, I can paste it, or you can double click. All right, I am going to pause this video and finish pasting everything in to these cells while you guys paste yours. There, you see it did that again. It pasted it all in different rows because I did not double click when I pasted. So sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. Before I move on, I am going to go ahead and widen some of these. I noticed that my Venn sections is very wide, so I'm going to go ahead and widen that one. I am also going to see how this Venn sections is way down here. You see up here at the top, this is my alignment. If I select all of this and click the top alignment, it'll move everything to the top, but the middle is what looks really good. So I'm going to leave it in the middle, and I'm going to make it all bold, and I'm going to go ahead and paint it blue. I'm also going to center them horizontally with this next thing below the vertical centering that we just did. So you guys can see that I can center things left, I can center them right, or I can put them in the middle. That's what looks good here. Now, a couple of other things. The number of Americans in millions, I'm going to widen that column just a little. number of Americans in VIN sections, I'm going to widen it just to, I don't really like the word of by itself, but it looks like that's how it's copied and pasted, no problem. We can just do that. And then I am going, you see on this next one, it says % of Americans in the VIN section where S is on another line. We don't ever want that to happen. We always want it to look nice and neat. All right, guys, we're getting somewhere. Now I'm going to show you one more thing, and then I'm going to pause the video and paste all this stuff in here. See right here where it says Americans on my instruction page? I'm just going to double click that, and it selects it. And then I can Control Charlie, bring it over to my Excel, and Control Victor. And that is going to be the quickest way for me to copy and paste all these. So I am going to pause the video and get this done. I'll just show you guys real quick here on this last piece. I copied and pasted it into this cell. And you see how it just says HBP for high blood pressure? The reason that's happening is because I need to make my row wider. So just click the row. For me, it's row 25, and then I just widen it a little, and everything will show up. And you could also widen your row or widen your column. Either one works just fine. I could actually just widen this column. Oh, there's another thing too. When you widen things left, like for example, up here I'm working on column Juliet, and I grabbed it from the right-hand side, and I was trying to widen kilo, but it doesn't work that way. You always have to widen and narrow things from the right side of the column. All right, so I think I like this piece better like that. And it looks like I added an extra row to my table. No big deal. All I have to do is select that row. Well, the only reason I can do this is because I don't have anything else next to it. So I can just select that row, right-click, and delete it. You know, you also could have just gotten rid of your borders or left it, really, but we do want our data tables to be very clear. All right, pausing the video again to complete my table. All right, I got everything put in there. I am going to go ahead and widen my table just to, I think this looks better that way. I did notice Abaza. I hadn't actually centered mine, and neither did Tinny. Tinny, you can see here, Tinny left his to the left, flush left, but Abaza actually centered hers, and look how nice it looked. I really like how her chart looks. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to make my chart look like Abaza's, because hers is better than mine. So she had all this data centered. It looked really good. She also made it extra long so that it would all be in one space. And then what she did is she actually made it a little bit smaller. So you guys can do different things to make your data look better. Oh, I see the way I copied and pasted it. It was actually just a little too long. So there we go. Now mine looks nice like Abaza's. Not quite as nice because she's an artist. Abaza here is actually a graphics design artist. I might have mentioned that in the last video. She did such a spectacular job making her Excels beautiful, but so did Tinny. And Tinny is a police officer and doesn't have any graphic design. As a matter of fact, Tinny had to steal his son's computer because he had no idea how to use the computer. And he did such beautiful work on Excel. And I'm so proud of each of you who step out of your element and do something different with this technology. Good for you. All right, let's keep rolling along here. Now we are going to use the data from table A to fill in our table here for part Bravo. So let's see what that means exactly. We have the number of Americans in millions. Well, folks, for this data table, what you would actually do here is we're going to put in the number of Americans in millions. You see how Abaza put 326.2? That's 326 million, 326.2 million. So when she collected this data from the website, there was 326. Wow, look at our population has already grown 2 million, which is crazy because didn't we just see on that website that it was 8 births and 12 deaths? So when we look at population, we have to think about more than that. We have immigration and other type of things that we need to look at for our population. So now listen carefully. For the sake of simplicity, I am going to simply type in 100 right here. And you guys are welcome to do this also. And it just keeps things simple and keeps the numbers manageable. We'll come back later and put in the other numbers. But right now, I'm just going to pretend like we're dealing with 100 Americans, okay? But really this number is right here. 328,943,892 is what will go here later. But I'm going to show you guys something cool. You're going to like this. All right, now I want to know what percent. Let's see. I'm actually going to move this over just so we can see better. Oh, that wasn't a good idea because I had everything all set up, didn't I? Okay, no problem. So 100 Americans. Well, then we have what percent of Americans? Well, that's all of the Americans, right? So we don't need to put anything there. that's 100% of the Americans. Now, it says that 9,000, okay, so this number right here is actually supposed to say 29%. And I think I have a little typo there, so I'm going to have to go back in and fix that on your page, because that does come out to be 29% of Americans. I'm actually going to pause the video and fix that now. All right, easy fix. So now it does say 29% on your document that you're looking at today. So here we have our 29% of Americans are classified as obese. So over here under obese, I am going to type in 29%, but I'm going to select, this whole column is going to be recorded in percent. So I'm actually going to select all of that column. I'm going to hold down the control key on my keyboard, and then also select this other column over here, because this is percent too. I'm going to come up to my number here and click percent. So now everything I write in these cells will be recorded as a percent. So the number of obese Americans, I have 29%. And then I have 10.5%. I'm going to pause the video and fill all of this in. All right, I realize I better stay with you guys while I do this, because a couple of other things are happening. First of all, the next one that I type in, I'm going to show you guys two things. If you only click one time on the cell and you put in 10.5, it comes up as 11. The reason for that is this: we don't have enough decimal places. So I'm going to select these columns again, these two columns. I select one, hold control, select the other. And then right up here in my decimal places, I'm going to move it so that I have one decimal. I'm actually going to go ahead and do that here too. I actually want to see, I don't think we need a decimal over here, I don't remember. But we actually want to have decimals at least to the 10th place for all of our data. All right, now here's another situation that can occur. If I double click into my cell, see how it has that blinking cursor? And now I put in my 32.7%, 32.7. Well, it's actually multiplying it by 100 because of the percent. So we do have to only click in the cell one click. See how there's no cursor in there? If you have a cursor, it will not work. Just one click, and now I can put 32.7%. And then 90. And then again, see, I had clicked too many times there. So you just one click, all kinds of just little things. Excel is very finicky, as I'm sure if you're already on scenario 3 here, you know that. Excel is very picky. Now I have all of my percentages in there. Now let's see what we need to calculate here. I have that 29% of Americans are classified as obese. So in this cell, number of Americans, well, it's 29. See how big I can make this and still see this other chart over here. Or actually what I can do, I'm going to actually move this chart. I don't know. You think that's going to look okay? It won't work anyway, so that's all right. 29% of Americans. So in this cell under obese, I'm going to put an equal sign. That's 29% of, that means multiply, of Americans. Now, Americans, 10.5% of Americans are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So now here we have 10.5% of, that's multiplication, Americans are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. 32.7% of Americans have high blood pressure. So again, I'm going to do, and you know, you guys can actually just select this cell and drag it down, because, no, you can't. Why? Because look, it actually referenced the cell 1 to the right and 2 above, because that's what we did before. So I actually have to change this right here to be, it's actually this, Americans. All right, so we have 32. Whoops. I'm gonna pause the video, something's wrong. All right, always something little, it was just my keyboard was not attached properly. All right, so now back to this, 32.7% of Americans. All right, then we have 90%. Now this is where we have to be careful. 90% of American type 2 diabetics are classified as obese. So you have to be real careful here. This is not 90% of Americans. This is 90% of American type 2 diabetics. So now for this one, we have 90% of type 2 diabetics. Okay, and then we have, what's next? 90% of American type 2 diabetics have high blood pressure. So we're in the same boat here. We have 90% of our type 2 diabetics, of Americans with type 2 diabetes, are also diagnosed with high blood pressure. Now, 86% of obese people have high blood pressure. So for obese and high blood pressure, we have that 86% of, what was it? 86% of obese people. And then we have that 81% of type 2 diabetics are obese with high blood pressure. So now we have 81% of type 2 diabetics. All right, everything's looking good. Hopefully, I could have clicked in some wrong places. I hope I didn't. I will find out once my numbers start popping up over here. Now, let's look at this. We have the number of Americans in these VIN sections. Folks, do you remember when we looked at this PowerPoint? Let's just go back and look at this PowerPoint again real quick at how we calculated these. Remember how we started off with 10 people in our sample, and then as we moved through, we started here at the bottom, and we had 3 people that belonged to all 3 of these subsets, and then we started subtracting that number and subtracting these numbers out to get the pieces that we needed for the other sections. So this is what we're going to be doing. This notation should look familiar to you in this Excel report. This is exactly what we're doing, the same thing. Now, the first thing that we know is how many people have all 3 of these diseases. So we are going to type in equals 8.5. So out of 100 people, 8.5 of them have all 3 of these diseases. Remember that we just used the 100 here. Now, when we do the next section, remember we have to subtract out. So now for this section, we are actually going to take the number of people with obesity and high blood pressure, which is 24.9, and then we are going to subtract out the number of people that had all 3 because it's overlapping data. Remember our skydivers? All right, now we have the number of people with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure minus the number of people who had all 3. All right, we have the number of people with type 2 diabetes and obesity minus, again, the number of people who had all 3. The number of people with high blood pressure, I think I might have an error here. Let me check. When we subtract the amount that has it, well, so far it hasn't mattered because all 3 is not going to change. And what I'm trying to get at here is I really should have been subtracting, my subtraction number should have been from down here, from this column. And right now, that doesn't matter because the number is the same, but it will not be the same as we move forward. So let's just go ahead and change that. I'm just subtracting out from the same column, not from the other column. I can still grab my first data set from there, but not the subtracting parts, and it'll be different here now moving forward. So now I have the number of people with high blood pressure, which is out of 100, 32.7 of them. And now I have to subtract out the number of people with high blood pressure and obesity. So high blood pressure and obesity, unfortunately, it looks like I should have rearranged this, but you should just know anyway that obesity and high blood pressure is the same thing as high blood pressure and obesity. So I'm going to subtract out this piece. I also have to subtract out type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. And I also have to subtract out all 3. All right, and you guys can see I did not have to subtract anything out of this column because it did not have any high blood pressure in there. So I did have to subtract out everything that had overlapping data. And again, if you guys come back and look at this slide, you can see where we found an individual piece. Like, for example, for this type 2 diabetes, we had to subtract out all of the other pieces. This one, we only had to subtract out 2 pieces because remember how this piece down here was 0, so we didn't have to keep dealing with it. All right, now where are we? Type 2 diabetes. The number of Americans with type 2 diabetes minus what? Type 2 diabetes and obesity, right here. Minus, again, type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure minus type 2 minus all three. There we go. All right, now, I'm sorry, I should have actually done this way earlier. Now I have the number of people who are obese, who have obesity, minus type 2 and obesity, minus type 2 and high blood pressure, minus all three. And then here's where we get to talk about a complementary set. Well, how many of the Americans have none of these things? Well, it is going to be the number of Americans over here minus the sum, remember sum means to add stuff up, the sum of all of these numbers. So the sum of everything that just came before that. And I'm just going to double check that. I have from October 19 to October 25, or OSCA, sorry, it's OSCA, not October. And I know I said it weird, OSCA, that's how you say it. So from OSCA 19, right here, all the way down to 25, so that's correct. So that's 100 minus all of these other numbers. That's a complementary set. So if 47.6 Americans out of 100 don't have any of these three diseases, that means that what, about 53, 52.4 or so Americans do have one of these three diseases. Now, we want to know what is the percent of Americans in these Venn diagrams. So now we're going to calculate percentages. We have that, we want to know what is 47.6, what percent is 47.6 of 100. So we're going to divide that. This number divided by 100. And it looks like we have 47.6%. Okay, I just realized this 47.6 was too high. So I went back and found my error, and it looks like right here, I had my number of obese people. See how it's blue and this is blue? I can clearly see where things are correlating. And then I subtracted type 2 diabetes and obesity. That was correct. And then I needed to subtract obesity and high blood pressure, but instead I subtracted this other one. So I need to come back in here and change this. All right, there we go. Now this is the correct value. All right, now let's keep going. I have to find the percent of Americans. So now, oh, and you guys are going to notice I changed a bunch of stuff here because I was trying to find my mistake. So right here, all the numbers, some of the numbers have changed, but right here you see this 3.26. I'm just going to change that back to 100. I just had to go back to another one of these that I worked so I could find the error. Okay, so now let's just get back to work here. I have, for this particular problem, I have divided the number to the left by the American population. I do want the number to the left to keep changing when I drag this down, but I don't want my American population to change. So I'm going to lock that cell in with a $sign on each side of the letter. For me, it's Lima, and you guys will put the $sign and it will lock the cell in. Now I can just click that cell and double click this bottom right-hand corner, and it will fill in the rest for me. All right, so now I know 63.1% of Americans are without either obesity, high blood pressure, or type 2 diabetes. 3.1% have only obesity, and so on. 8.5% have all three. Wow, look at that, you guys. More people have all three than have just obesity. So if you're 40 pounds or more overweight, the probability of getting type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure is much higher. All right, so now let's see what we've got here. We have created all of this using the number 100. Now, what you guys are going to do, this is number of Americans in millions. So you're just going to change this number. We have 328,943,000. I'm just going to use abazas, or, you know, it doesn't matter. If you guys are going to call this millions, it's going to be 328.9 million. So we're going to come over here and type in right here, what did I say? 328.9 million people. And once we change that, all of our numbers will change because all of the cells are referenced. Now, something you're going to notice, let's undo that. All right, you'll notice that the numbers are changing. Number of Americans are changing, but the percentages are not, because we have what we call equivalent ratios. So see how the numbers are changing, but the percentages are not changing. That's because percents, you know, it's a ratio, it stays the same. In other words, if I you know, if I take 29% of 300 or 29, you know, percent of 100, it's still 29%. And in that case, I had 29% of 100, but now I have 29% of 328.9 million. So either way, it's still 29%. All right, guys, we are ready to insert our Venn diagrams. So I am going to insert an illustration, and that is going to go to Smart Art right here. Under Smart Art, you have all of these things you can look at. I'm going to click on Relationships, and it will give me a few options. Scroll down until you find the Venn diagram. We are going to use this Venn diagram, the basic Venn. All right, look at that, you guys. Pretty cool, huh? Now, in these texts, we are going to type in, whoops, obese, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. And I think for obese, I just used just the, whoops. Don't you guys wish you had that back undo button for everything in life? All right, we'll just put OB on there for obese. Now we are going to create 2 of these Venn diagrams. So I'm actually going to go ahead and copy this and paste it again, because we do need 2 of these. I'm going to set these right below our chart here. And now we're going to label them. So the other thing we're going to do is under obese, I am going to type in the number. We're going to get 2 different sets of data here. First, we're going to look at our first Venn diagram for the number of people in millions, and then our second Venn diagram is going to be reported in percentages. So the number of obese people in America is 10.2 million. And you guys are going to label these. I'll go ahead and finish this out here with you. You see how I have that big separation there? If I select that and go up to my home page, nope, I don't have that option here. That's okay. 10.2. And then for my type 2 diabetes, I have type 2 diabetes was 0.3 million Americans. And then for high blood pressure, we had 22.4 million Americans have high blood pressure. Okay. So now over here for my obese, I have that. What percent of Americans are only obese? Remember, this is not all, because 29% of Americans are obese, but we're looking for the percentage of Americans that only belong to this piece of the pie. Okay, and we're going to come back and fill these other sections in here in just a minute. It's just going to be easier to do it the way I'm doing it. So for our obese Americans, we have the percentage is 3.1. Uh-oh, I'm going to pause the video. Something's gone wrong. Nothing major, thankfully. All right, so we had 3. Oh, I know what's wrong. This can happen to you guys, so I'm glad this happened, because last time I am trying to use my number pad on my keyboard, but the number pad is actually turned off, so it does that weird thing every time I try to use it. So if your number pad's turned off, that can happen to you. All right, so 3.1%. And I'm going to go ahead and include the percent sign here of Americans are obese. Our type 2 diabetics, we have wait, is that type 2 diabetics? Is 0.1%. And then people with only high blood pressure, we had 6.8%. All right, now we are going to go ahead and fill in all of these other spaces. I am going to insert a text box all the way over here on the right, a text box. I'm going to draw the text box. I do not want this text box to have a line around it, so I'm going to click on it, go to outline, and put no outline. All right, and then I'm also going to center the text box. So coming up here, I'm going to center it both horizontally and vertically, and I'm going to start typing some numbers in. So now I'm looking for my overlapping data set. let's see, I'm trying to think of a few things before we go here. I'm going to move these charts down just a little bit because once I do what I'm about to do, it's not going to be easy to move them around. All right, so here's my little chart. I'm looking for, let's go ahead and mark all three. How many Americans had all three diseases? 28 million. All right, and then I'm just going to make this as small as I can. What do you guys think about a font here? Maybe about a 14? You guys can make some executive decisions on your material. All right, so now this is going to go right here, but you see how it's white in there? I am going to click that, or you can right click and go to format shape, and there'll always be all different kinds of ways this stuff comes up. Click on the little shape options. See how it says text options, shape options, go to the paint can and fill and put no fill. Okay, and we could have done that back when we took the line off as well. All right, so 28 million, now I'm just going to copy Control Charlie, Control Victor, that little text box, and I'm just actually going to put them everywhere I need them with the number 28, which is cool because that's actually my favorite number. And then I need 1, 2, 3, 4 more over here, so I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, Control Victor 4 times, and just come over here and put them all around. Uh-oh, if that happens, you just Control Zulu. Okay, oh darn. Okay, so I am putting my little 28s all around here, and then you guys are going to fill them in with the correct numbers. I'm going to actually, I think I'll pause the video and do that. But before I do it, let's go ahead and I'm going to select this and paste it again. I accidentally just made it bold. And then I'm going to do a couple of other things here. I'm going to label this number of Americans in millions. And that is going to be the label for that chart. And then over here, we are going to, I'm just going to Control Charlie, Control Copy. Over here, I'm going to write this and put the percent of Americans. And we don't need in millions because 3% of a million percent is just doesn't work that way. Okay, now let's see, a couple other things I'm going to do before I fill all of this in is selecting my Venn diagram. I am going to put an outline around that Venn diagram. So you can select your Venn diagram, right click, go to Format Object, which mine's already up, but I wanted to show you guys how. Go to this, down here where it says line on your paint can, go to line and put solid line. And then you can make your line, you know, thicker or different colors, whatever you want. I'm going to make mine 2, I guess. That'll be good. Which that did not give me what I wanted here. So I'm going to have to do something different. I do remember now that I wasn't able to get that to work before. So this is what we're going to do, because when we talk about Venn diagrams, we have to have a universe. Remember how we talked about the universe when we did these? For example, this one had 3 left in the universe. Venn diagrams have to have a universe or they will not work. So I am going to insert an illustration, a shape, a rectangle. I'm going to put that rectangle around my entire Venn diagram, including my label. I am going to go to Shape Fill. You can always get to that by right-clicking and go to Format if you don't see it up here. And I don't want any fill in there, okay? Now I can go to my outline and I can make it a little bit fatter. There we go. All right, now I have this lovely thing, and I cannot forget, folks, we have to remember our universe label. So I'm going to grab one of these little labels out again. And what was, how many Americans had nothing here? 207.7 million, right? Because look, it was 207.65, so I rounded that 6 to a 7 because the 5 to the right said to round it. All right, there we have it, you guys. And again, all of these 28s can't stay here. You guys can just change these to the right numbers. And then over here, now I have this lovely, I'm gonna move this over. I'm just gonna make it smaller. I'm just going to Control Charlie, Control Victor, and voila, now I have a universe for my other Venn diagram. I am going to choose this little guy and bring him right over here. And this was 63.1%. All right, now you guys are going to fill in everywhere you see these 28s. I'm going to leave that to you guys to fill in. And I think that we have completed this scenario. The only thing left here is a 5-sentence report. So to do your 5-sentence report, you are going to insert, and you actually already have text boxes here. So you can actually just select one of these text boxes, Control Charlie, Control Victor, and come over here and just make the text box real big. And you can change it if you want it to be, you know, at the top. And then you can actually write your 5-sentence report. And you guys, excuse me, you get your 5-sentence report from your document. It tells you exactly what to talk about. You guys are going to talk about the, where are we? Right here. Describe the population and sample of the data. In this case, it was the entire United States was our population, and the sample was taken from the Bureau of Investigation. The United States government took random samples from around the United States. And you don't have to read all of that in the documents. You can take my word for it. I have read all of the documents. Explain the sections of the Venn diagram. Include explanations of the intersections and describe how the data is sorted. So you guys are going to do your best to kind of try to put this sorting process into some words. Each Venn diagram reports only the number that is in that section and not for the entire type 2 diabetes. But the type 2 diabetes section actually has 1, 2, 3, well, 4 sections on this Venn diagram. One of them is just empty. So you guys can explain to us that your Venn diagram, which one did we just do? Your Venn diagram here, for example, obesity has 1, 2, 3, 4 sections within that one circle. So you'll want to be sure and explain that to us. Also, you are going to relate the two numbers, relate the two number of Americans in your first Venn diagram to the percentage in the second Venn diagram. There's obviously some kind of typo there, but what that means is you guys will relate these two things. Here I have 10.2 million Americans, which is 3.1% of Americans. Here I have 22.4 million Americans, which is 6.8% of Americans. So you guys are going to talk about that also. The next thing on our list of 5 sentences is to explain the probability of being obese and not having type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure relative to the probability of having all 3 diseases. Well, so let's look at that. That's the most profound thing about this entire statistic, is the fact that, oh, now look, I need this here. I'll just change this real quick. It was 8.5%. 8.5. All right, so you guys can see that you have an 8.5% probability as an American of having all 3 of these things, where only 3.1% of Americans have only obesity. So the risk of high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes becomes extremely high once you have obesity. More people actually have all 3 than have just obesity. So that's what we're talking about, looking at in that last piece here where it says to explain the probability. And then it says, what are some different probabilities of having type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure depending on where you live? And what are some reasons the probability of all 3 health risks are higher in some areas? So what we're going to do there, I actually skipped this part. We created our Venn diagram. Now let's look at, right here, part echo said to look at the adult obesity graph here. You guys are actually going to grab a snipping, I'm using my snipping tool here, of this graph. And you can get as much of it. If you want to get this whole other piece over here, you can. And then you guys are going to pin this into your Excel report. Because in your report, when you guys talk to us, you are going to explain what different parts of the United States. I'm going to actually move my 5-sentence report over there, put my obesity graph here. So you guys are actually going to look over this chart and explain in your Excel report the probabilities of living in these different states. And we talked about this already a little bit, a much lower probability of being an obese adult in Colorado relative to being an obese adult in Arkansas. So, and then you guys will also see, if you look at some of the other statistics, the probabilities of having type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure. So you guys will be talking about that in your report as well. I think we covered everything. Let's just double check. Here's our document. Here it is. And then, yes, talk about those different statements. So you guys, that is your Excel report. Again, I did leave you to fill in where it says 28 everywhere. You will actually match those numbers, so I'll be looking for that. All right, folks, that is the end of our probability and population Excel report. Until next time, I'll see you then.